Welcome to the pre-show. This is just the pre-show. Nothing to write home about yet. Just making sure we are all set up and ready to go for the first 3 minutes of this broadcast. We go live on Odyssey Radio at 3 minutes after the top of the hour. And just like we do every night. So welcome. The Dead End Collective, good evening. Good to see you, Niall. Glad you're here. Don't really feel qualified to comment on the subject matter until I know the context, but glad to be here. We're talking mostly about, and it's things that you would experience over there in Ireland as well. And I think in all civilized, quote unquote, countries in the West, it's that striving by the radical progressive left, if you will, to win the hearts and minds of people. And when they're not winning the hearts and minds of adults, they're doing it through our children. And it's the educational system. It's we're going to look at that. We'll recap that a little bit, but that's basically the topic we're talking about for the next couple of days while we go through this. Really on this this whole topic of kind of said it by the title of a book I read called Stolen Children. And it's not talking about kidnapped children. It's talking about the brainwashing of children in order to get certain political mindsets across. So we've got 1 minute left and we go live over on the radio station. So, and we will have a captain's cabin tonight. We'll see how that goes. My brain is ready to call it quits for the day, but I got plenty of energy to go through this. I presume the sexual revolution is a big part of this, says Niall. What sexual revolution are you talking about? I'm talking about when I don't care what anybody's sexual preferences are or the way they identify or all that until you start trying to pass it off to my kids. Then it's a problem. That's the only way I think that it's affecting us, is the way it's being, children are being used to get a message across. We're going to go dark for a few seconds. We'll be right back.
Intrepid Radio program with Scotty Roberts. Intelligent talk.
Well, happy Wednesday evening, folks. Welcome to the program. I am your host, Scotty Roberts, and this here is my show, the Intrepid Radio program, right here on OdysseyRadio.com. You can go over to Odyssey Radio to hear the audio version of this show and all the archives of this show. But it's in audio format only. It's a radio station. So you can also come over to my YouTube channel, which I do not broadcast live every night on my YouTube channel anymore. There are certain topics of the show that I like to take live because I don't want anybody to miss them. We also have my Patreon channel. You can go over to patreon.com/Scotty Roberts, and you can help support that channel. All that is, I'll say it again, all Patreon is like, this is where it's a site for artists and creators and radio people of all different kinds of musicians, creative people, to go and to get people to help them produce what they're producing financially. It's like crowdfunding, but a different way. And so I put my site up there. I don't have a pope to help me paint the ceilings. And so I say, for the cost of about a cup of coffee a month, you can come over and support the show. And if you do, you'll get about 30 shows over there every month. And so that's what the Patreon is all about. And we do have ways to join the YouTube channel as well. But I don't do everything over on YouTube anymore. But everything does play over on Patreon. So go take a look and see what you think. And if you like what you see, come on over. And tonight we're going to pick up where we left off the other night. I'm going to do a little bit of recapping. And I was hey, Elvis, good to see you. Scott is in the building, ladies and gentlemen, smashing the like button. Thank you, Elvis. I sure appreciate that. Sage Outcast, good to see you. You say, hey now. I don't know what the hey now was, too. I missed when you said it. But you can clarify over in the chat room. Folks, if you're not in the chat room, you can join the chat room now. Come on over, make your presence known, and you can talk it up a storm all the way through the show. So we'll go from there, and I'll try to, at times, look over to the chat room and see what everybody's saying. So Dead End Collective says, I mean parents and institutions promoting gay, trans, and children way before they should. That's indoctrination, too. It certainly is. I have a problem with that. I have a big problem with that. We're going to maybe hit some of that tonight if we get to that section in my notes. But that is something that this is all about. It's, if you've noticed, the whole gay and trans communities make up, if I am not mistaken, under 1% of the total population in America. Yet you wouldn't know it by looking at it. You'd think that it's the majority. That's because they have somehow made that a thing where if you don't accept it, you're just like they did with the word racist. Now you're transphobe. Now you're all these different things. You know what? No. And parents are getting tired of that. They're tired of hearing that small sliver of America being supported by institutions, being supported by the media. Just because the institutions support it and the media supports it doesn't mean the majority of people want it. Nowhere near the majority of people. But we have to be tolerant of it, we're told. Otherwise, we are one of these negative labels they will put on us. And I think that is the problem. The problem is that we're being asked to go along with something we don't agree with. If you want to tell me your nouns are whatever they might be, I don't have to go along with that. But there's something unwritten now, all of a sudden, in the last few years. It's unwritten that if you don't do it, it's not a law, but you can't say anything. You got to say him, her, his, her, their, theirs, whatever it might be. Now they got a whole new list of things that aren't even words that they're using for saying this is what I identify as. Well, I identify as a guy who believes in two genders and two sexes. I identify as a guy that doesn't give a good goddamn what you choose your personal pronouns to be. Don't make me have to go along with it. You can call yourself a tree if you want. I don't care. That doesn't mean I have to. So there you go. And that sounds cold and harsh. And to a certain extent it is. It's only cold and harsh because of people like me who are fed up with that side of a political agenda telling me I have to think a certain way or I am a certain something. That isn't true. I don't have to think the way you think. You don't have to think the way I think. But we can all live together. We can all do great things together, even though I don't think the way you think or you think the way I think. Hey, Michael, good to see you, brother. Viking Off-Roading. And if I haven't said hi to you, Sage Outcast, I saw you. And Claudette, good to see you. Field Guy, good to see you, brother. I can say whatever I choose. I don't believe in their made-up wordings. That's it. Two genders, male, female, that's it. Yeah, and now when your school, however, is trying to push that on you, you have to ask why. You have to ask what powers that be are in education, especially in America, that are pushing that. That's not the place. The home is where that gets pushed, one way or the other. School isn't for that. But, and we gave some examples the other night. So rather than talk around it by talking about these things, I want to get back into it. And that these are the things we were talking about the other night. We started off, we were talking about education. We started off the end of the show on Monday talking about education, saying there's good news and bad news about education. The good news is that leftism, this progressive, far leftism in our culture, is not something that is highly popular in America, believe it or not. It's a small percentage point. No matter what the news media is trying to tell you or the schools are trying to tell you, you got to look at who's running the schools, who is in the schools, who has been not infiltrating, but taking over our institutions of higher learning over the last 40 years. You get a good idea. The bad news is that woke autocrats haven't backed down. So instead, they've captured institutions from schools to corporations and beyond, and they're using the same methods as their totalitarian predecessors to force their bad ideas on all of us. And Niall, maybe that answers your question a little more succinctly. This is what we're looking at. And it's like the despots of failed leftist regimes, that the woke's goal is to target the children of this current generation so that their ideology spreads to parents through the kids. And its enforced conformity is step one of all of this. And schools, believe it or not, are the key battlegrounds. Now, it does depend on where your school is located. Our town, small town America, we are small town America, but most of our people that live here, if they're not farming or owning businesses in this town, they go to the big cities. They go to Minneapolis and St. Paul, less than an hour away. And that's where they work. So a lot of the people in our small town are all kind of Twin Cities people anyway. Minneapolis, St. Paul, metro people that live in the small town. And but schools are the key battleground. Our school's still pretty good here, but leftists needlessly closed schools during COVID, and they dared anyone to challenge their authority. They did not have that authority to do that. You tell me that the founders said the federal government is subservient to the states' governments, unless there's a pandemic. They didn't say that. You tell me the founders in the mid to late 1700s weren't familiar with what a pandemic was. They knew what pandemics were. And so the woke have targeted rigor and destroyed merit. They pretend that 2 + 2 doesn't always add up to 4. And they claim that there's somehow that it's all related to equity. It's equity between the races, between the genders, the 27 of them or so, they say now. And they're forcing an agenda on our kids that steals their childhood and that turns them into soldiers for woke causes, whether they realize they're doing so or not. Look at the climate issues. Look at the sexual issues. Look at the all the different issues that our kids have to face in school. And unless they have parents that know better, they're coming home with a lot of that wokeism, that woke ideology that's housed in the things they're being taught. And the indoctrination they push is all encompassing and it's merciless. And they have to be opposed. It's time to be brave. When I talked about the Constitution last week or the week before, time goes by so quickly. I was talking about how movements usually start with one person. It was James Otis in America that said, no. He says, I will not think this way. And he stood up against it. He was a lone person. He lost his position. He lost his money. He lost because he stood up. But you know what? He started a movement and people followed him. Because people don't always want to be the first one to stand up and say something. It's where I hailed to that old biblical verse where it says, and God said, I looked for a man among them who would stand up and stand in the gap, but I found none. And so we used to say, when I was in the military, the brief time I was in the military, we used to refer to ourselves as standing in the gap. And I've used that phrase ever since. Do you stand in the gap? Do you do the things that are necessary? I saw an old speech of Ronald Reagan's just yesterday, and he was aboard some aircraft carrier. And this is about 40 years ago when he was president. Hard to believe that. But it was 40 years ago. I voted for him. I was an adult. But he was saying, he was thanking those on the aircraft carrier, the sailors that were there. He was thanking them profoundly on behalf of the rest of America to say, you are the ones who stand in the gap. You are the ones who give of yourselves. You are the ones who are out here, out at sea. You're deployed for months at a time, and you don't see your wives or your kids, your families. And he says, you're the ones that we owe a thank you to, because you're the ones who put your lives on the line. You're the ones who put your lives on hold to serve our country. And I thought that was very profound. That's profound about standing in the gap. Field guy 2 + 2 is 22. 2 and a 2 is 22. And so it's time you oppose these things and stand up. Now, this book I read, she started writing about totalitarians and our children, and she started writing about the gulags. And so I started our last show. I kind of ended the show starting to get into the whole gulag situation. You look at Solzhenitsyn, Alexander Solzhenitsyn. I've got his book in here. I will say it was a little bit of a tedious read, but I did not complete that book, but I've still got it. The Gulag Archipelago. And it chronicles his own time in the gulags. And remember, the gulags were labor camps. And I tried to pronounce the Russian in that. The Glavnoya Upravlenaya Ispravaliento Telno Trudovik Lugere, or just as easily said, the Chief Administration of Corrective Labor Camps. It was a bureaucratic name for forced labor camps that were maintained during the Soviet Union, started under Stalin. Alexander Solzhenitsyn criticized Stalin in a paper, and he got put away for how many years? 8 years, something like that, in the gulags. And he wrote about it when he defected to America. Or was it England? The West. And the author had written about her own grandparents. Aaron Gelberg and his wife Kaya. And they owned a bakery in Gamel, Belarus, when private enterprise became illegal under the rule of Joseph Stalin. And being Jewish in the Soviet Union had been easy, but there was something different. They were no longer simply other, quote unquote, and it was overnight. And they became enemies of the state. Aaron became a political prisoner. They hadn't stepped out of line. The line had just shifted beneath their feet. And so other people in the gulags were politicians, intellectuals, artists, simply related to one of those objectionable persons. And some were there because they had said the wrong thing, others because they didn't say the right things. Do you see any similarities there? Just the tinkling of similarity? Some were there because they said the wrong things, others there because they didn't say the right things. Solzhenitsyn, for example, was sentenced to 8 years for criticizing Stalin in a private letter. And some prisoners were there for no discernible reason at all. So that there were also children in the gulags. Hey, Barbie D, good to see you here. Elderberry, good to see you. Those wandering in. Vera Solzhenitsyn writes, Vera Inkchik, the daughter of a charwoman, and 2 other girls, they were all aged 14, discovered in 1932, Yasik, that in the course of the liquidation of the kulaks, the little children were being thrown out to die. The girls, like the revolutionaries earlier, decided to protest. They wrote out their protests in their own handwriting on sheets of paper taken from their school notebooks and posted them in the marketplace themselves. expecting immediate and universal indignation. Instead, all the girls were eventually arrested and sent to the gulags. And the girls discovered the hard way that protest was only allowable when it fit into the narrow confines of acceptable speech, a theme that carries to the present day. Look at the things you see in American news. You see it in British news. You see it in France. You see it in Germany. You see it in the West primarily. We saw it in China recently, that people, when they are fed up, they will speak up. Some countries, they could lose their lives for speaking up. Here in America, we have a constitution which guarantees you the right to speak your mind and to have freedom of that speech, but that's slowly changing. They're working their ways around that. They're trying to make, that's political correctness. Political correctness, we've called it, the public mindset. But the public mindset isn't as widespread as you think. The public mindset just has a louder soapbox. The public mindset's a small minority, a very small percentage point. It's not as big as you think. And you have the right to stand up, but most people don't do that. Most people don't open their mouth. My mom used to say, oh, he wouldn't open his mouth if how did she put it? He wouldn't open his mouth if it was full of shit, she'd say. So that's the way a lot of people are in this country. So these girls discovered that they couldn't say what they wanted to say. And it's a theme that carries on to our present country and situation. Children who protest should be encouraged unless they're protesting something the woke left doesn't like. Look at all the demonstrations and the protests that went on over the last few years. Look at the Black Lives Matter bullshit and their protests. What happened if you spoke out against the burning of whole neighborhoods? You were told that you had to shut up. You weren't allowed to speak. Stories weren't being covered by the media. So children who protest should be encouraged. But the left doesn't like that. Wokeism doesn't like that. And this man, this great-grandfather of this woman who wrote this book, he didn't have to protest. Simply being himself was enough to get him sent to the gulag because of who he was. And she said this in her book, great-grandfather sounds distant, but I always kept Aaron's story very close to me, partly because I was raised by his daughters. Aaron and Kaya had 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls. The boys, Ilya and Abram, went missing in action during World War II and were never heard from again. The husband of the older daughter, Raya, died in that war, and she, a newlywed, never remarried or had children. The youngest daughter, Sarah, was my grandmother. Sarah and Raya helped raise me while my parents worked intensely long hours to get our lives started in Brooklyn. The trauma of their lives was evident in everything they did. Solzhenitsyn quotes a girl, Svetlana Sedova, whose father was similarly taken away. And from the age of 6, I've been the daughter of a traitor to the motherland. And there can be nothing more awful in life than this. And as she goes on to say, her grandmother and her sister similarly carried their experiences as traitors, always careful about what they said and to whom. So the 4 Gelberg siblings produced only one descendant. She said her father. Their family was torn by circumstances. Yes, war, displacement, disasters that have upended people's lives since the beginning of time. But at the core of their family's decay was the oppression of a tyrannical state, a dedication to sameness and forced equality. My grandmother and her siblings were children when their father was taken away, she said, but they learned the lesson: obey. If this starts to sound eerily familiar, you know where you're hearing it from. I was raised with the knowledge, she said, that the freedom I had gotten to experience in the United States should not, for a single moment, be taken for granted. I had somebody say today, and if you happen to be listening to this show, I'm not picking on you, but he's somebody who regularly does not like my more conservative take on things. He's not mean or anything, he just states his case. But he said, it sounds like you're saying there is such a thing as American exceptionalism. And I said, you're damn straight. I believe in Americans' exceptionalism. What did this woman just say? I was raised with the knowledge that the freedom I have gotten to experience in the United States should not, for a single moment, be taken for granted. None of it is promised. Sometimes the slide toward an authoritarian society is very slow. Other times it's very fast. America is in danger. People are not being carted off to work camps. That's true. But that was also true for much of the Soviet Union as well at the time. Gulags only existed for about 30 of the USSR's 69 years. And yet the stifling of speech, the fear of committing a crime today that wasn't a crime yesterday, the indoctrination, the censorship, all persisted in Soviet society until the USSR's last day. And in the 1980s, a slow loosening had begun in the Soviet Union. I remember watching it live at Ronald Reagan. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. Reagan helped dismantle the USSR. And we had arrived at, now, some might say, well, that caused a lot of other problems. Sure it did. Do you think there aren't problems in being free when you've been held under really a political bondage? This author said they arrived in America in 1978. That's the year I graduated from high school. And a few years later, she said her mother could actually come visit them. And this was somewhat groundbreaking. My mother's father, she said, had a low-level government job and could never be allowed out. But the fact that his wife could even make the trip was novel and exciting. And even then, my grandmother barely spoke, convinced she was being followed and would be in danger for what she said, indoctrination. It had been more than 30 years since they had closed the gulags, but all the lessons of fear and compliance remained. America is in a conformist moment of its own, folks, and this is the danger. And the signs are all too familiar for families like this author's family. I would say families like my stepfather's family. I've mentioned him before. My sister, who is 5 years younger than me, the daughter of my mom's second husband. And so she's technically my half-sister, but never has been deemed that. We grew up our whole lives together. And her dad was a man named Vasil Nikolajenko. He was Ukrainian. And something I didn't learn until later in life. He died 10 years ago at age, we think he was 82. There was difference on his documents versus what he told us, and I think it was 82. He had fallen down his own basement steps in his house and had a heart attack at the same time and lay on the floor for 3 days before, 2 days, I think, before my sister said, I've been calling Dad and I can't get a hold of him. I'm running over there. He was in Minneapolis, and of course, he went to the hospital and died a couple of days later. But Vasil Nikolajenko, his family, he came over to America when he was a younger man in the 50s. And he and his parents, they were prisoners in concentration camps in Ukraine under the Soviet Union, under Stalin. And they had somehow, I don't know the whole story. I'm going to have my sister on talk about this story because it's an interesting story. They escaped and they came to America. And they came to America seeking asylum. And he lived here ever since, in the same house ever since. So America is in a conformist moment, folks. And that's what this little mini series we're doing here is going to be all about. It's about our kids. It's the fight, the battle for the minds of our children. And why anybody would want to be like this is beyond me. It's all about power and control. There's a lot of terms associated with this whole time: wokeness, cancel culture, indoctrination. They're all front and center, and the commercials start, "We believe," and the assumption is that only the worst people could possibly not be included in that "we." And there's a push from schools and corporations and media and elsewhere for one woke monoculture. And they're targeting ever younger children in this mission. They're on a march through our institutions. They may not be the same issues that was going on under Stalinistic Russia and the USSR. They're different issues. But trust me, it's all about who's in power and who's controlling the public mind. The term woke was once used by the black community to describe someone who stays alert to racism in society. But once it spread to a larger use, woke thought became more than just social awareness or just espousing leftist doctrine or even just having the right to beliefs. Wokeness became the enforcement mechanism of a narrow set of values and a policing of language. Social justice warriors and wokeness. It's now a method to shut down any alternative opinions, even those within the same general range. So if you don't agree with the woke crowd, they have the right to shut you down and shut down your speech. And that is wrong. But that's being taught to our children. Maybe not word for word, black and white. We're going to have a test on this on Friday. It's through the things that are promoted through a woke system of education, through a system of education that is there to indoctrinate children to think a certain way, rather than just teach them reading, writing, and arithmetic. It's a system characterized by intolerance and showing one's own superiority by denouncing those who step out of line. That is not exceptionalism in America. And though the whole woke ideology centers on a very different set of people than the USSR did, the methods are eerily similar. Merriam-Webster defines woke as aware of and actively attentive to important facts and issues, especially issues of racial and social justice, it says in parentheses. But that's the old definition. They've not updated the definition. Yet this avoidance to update woke is not because the publication is unwilling to revise definitions, but for example, after the October 2020 Senate Judiciary Committee hearing, Judge Amy Coney Barrett used the term sexual preference in what the left deemed as offensive manner. So Merriam-Webster rewrote the definition of the term as offensive to correspond with left-wing criticism. So the left-wing criticism has now caused Merriam-Webster to redefine words. Tell me that's not driven by a very small minority. The definition of the term became offensive. They have also added people who oppose vaccine mandates to the definition of anti-vaxxer. I oppose those, but I'm not an anti-vaxxer. And YouTube, unless you think I'm passing off medical misinformation because your Autobots will pick up the word vaccination, I'm not. Talking about I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I didn't take the vaccination. No one in my family did, and I was against it for many reasons. But I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I've had vaccinations. My kids have had vaccinations. but not this one. And we had our reasons. So Merriam-Webster is careful to cater to a very leftist audience. Why? Because even Merriam-Webster is woke. So after the November 2021 election, just last year, or 2 years ago, I'm sorry, where Democrats lost the gubernatorial race in Virginia and nearly lost it in New Jersey, longtime Democratic political consultant James Carville said stupid wokeness was responsible. And Carville, I was watching him in things like Crossfire and things like that 30 years ago. So he's kind of an old guy, and he was always the huge leftist, taking the leftist positions on everything. Even he said that stupid wokeness, quote unquote, was responsible. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the reigning queen of woke. How she got there, who the hell knows? But she shot back that wokeness is a term almost exclusively used by older people these days. So that should tell you all you need to know. So she's degrading old people, people that are supposed to have a little more wisdom than her. Welcome, Delaney Pearl Jones. Good to see you. Goddess Justice, good to see you. And if I'm offending anybody's sensibilities, why am I saying that right on the heels of my friend Goddess Justice? Because she has a different political belief than I do, and that's okay. Still love her. We're still friends. But so I might be talking about some things you might disagree with, and you are absolutely free to comment on some of these things, just like anybody else. So liberal television host Bill Maher then noted that woke was the Guardian's word of 2020, and that it was exactly people like AOC who introduced it to our lives. The term is no longer seen as an undeniable positive. It's not an undeniable positive anymore, being woke. I've said I'm awake, but I'm certainly not woke. The Guardian newspaper was complaining how the word woke was weaponized by the right as early as January of 2020, while linguist John McWhorter covered the New York Times in August of 2021 on how the term had become an insult. So it's understandable why the left is trying to drop it. Maher asked, "What word would you like us to use for the plainly insane excesses of the left that are not liberalism, but something completely different? Because you can't have the word liberal from us and think it should cover things like canceling Lincoln and teaching third graders that they're oppressors. That's all your new thing," Bill Maher said, who is a leftist. But let me correct that. He's a liberal who has found that leftism is not where it's at and not where he wants to be. So throughout everything we're going to be talking about in this little series about the battle for the minds of our kids, we're going to discuss wokeness as a new version of leftism that is directly aimed at our children. Now, you might agree with some of the things that wokeness will give you. There's very little that I agree with that has the definition of wokeness attached to it. Woke culture is as a set of deeply toxic ideas that are force-fed to the populace, in particular to children. And that's where you're seeing the battle being fought with our kids. Yeah, that's true. Goddess Justice, she says over in the chat room. She says, I use the term woke as indeed being aware of issues, often particularly issues of race. So having someone who isn't me, who doesn't use it the same way I do, tell me the definition doesn't wash. She says, we are friends. I'm independent, but you and I always have good discussions. If people don't listen to each other, no one learns a damn thing. I edited by putting in the word damn. You're absolutely right, Mir. If I may use your first name, I've revealed your secret identity. So I agree with you there. So part of the philosophy of wokeism, and indeed the definition of staying awake to offenses, is to always be seeking new targets for re-education under the current system. Racism, sexism, general wrongthink are always lurking somewhere and must be rooted out. The insidiousness of wokeism is a phenomenon where most American parents likely never picked up on or never fully realized the extent of until more recent days. That insidiousness isn't a twist of fate, it's a strategy. It's a strategy of brainwashing. Now, I'm using trigger words here that I want you to be triggered by because I want you to think about them. There is a movement alive today in America that is trying to supersede constitutional law and the laws of the land by being woke, by being by pushing cancel culture, by being politically correct. And it's a strategy of brainwashing. When they cannot get my generation, who do they go for? They go for our kids. And when I say go for, they many times don't even realize exactly what they're not like, we have this insidious plan here behind our dark shaded windows that we're going to incorporate now. I think there is some of that to an extent, trying to push political agenda. They're pushing what they believe is a right agenda in their view. But that agenda is going to change us dramatically. It's going to rip the Constitution to shreds. And those who know the Constitution need to stand and resist it. The woke are our moral betters. And while they imagine they understand human nature better and how our children better than we do, they also know that their message isn't necessarily appreciated or welcomed. And as a result, it's often slipped in like an Easter egg for our kids to discover in books and movies and everyday interactions. Niall asked toward the beginning, are you going to be talking kind of about the sexual stuff going on? The transism, the LGBTQ plus 26 other letters, and trans community stuff. Yeah, to a certain extent, not specifically at this point yet, but those are things that are being pushed by the vast minority. Like I say, under 1% of America. But they are pushing that, and they've got the media on their sides because they are of like mind. And they've got most of the media, and they've got politicians on their sides. And what they're doing is pushing an agenda. Are they pushing because they think they're going to destroy America? No, they're pushing because they think they're going to make a better America. But what they're going to do in that process is ruin our right to free speech. They're going to eradicate that as best they can. They're trying to dissolve that. And that's what we're going to keep talking about here in this series. The woke believe there are moral betters, and they believe they understand the human nature and the nature of our children better than we do as parents. In fact, leftism is deeply unpopular in America, which is why this woke language and behavior gets enforced through social and political pressure, not legal pressure. A Gallup poll released in early 2022 showed 37% of Americans described their political views as moderate, 36% as conservative, 25% as liberal. Only 7% describe themselves as very liberal, and only about half of Democrats describe themselves as liberals. The rest call themselves moderates or conservative, middle of the roaders. And the majority of Americans are not woke. And that's a good thing. I'm saying that because it's a good thing. They're not part of the woke movement. And yet wokeness has an outsized influence at the top of academia, culture, business, and across media. It's like I'm trying to think of what companies they were now. It was a company like, and I wish I had brushed up on what this was, but it just popped into my mind. the CEO of one of these outdoor gear type of companies. It was like Patagonia, or was Patagonia the guy he was talking about? I can't think of what it was. Which one of these companies? Suffice it to say, you would recognize the name if I could remember it. But there is a corporation out there that creates all this outdoor gear, tents, outdoor wear, shoes, boots, hiking stuff, camping gear, sporting gear. And there's another company that, oh no, it was a guy, I think that was part of an oil company that came out, a petroleum-based company, and came out against one of these, I think it was like Patagonia, that was saying that they supported shutting down the oil companies and all of this and no petroleum because they knew that their people that the people who bought from them, that's what they wanted to hear. Yet this petroleum exec, CEO, and it was very polite and it was very fun to watch. He did just the man standing dressed casually in his office, talking to the camera, and he says, I find it very interesting that Patagonia, or whichever company it was, that they're coming out and they're saying they're against the use of petroleum and they want to shut down the oil companies and all of this, when in fact, he says, not a single product that they produce and sell is not made from petroleum products. And he went through and listed a whole bunch, showed pages of their catalogs. So he says, well, we just want to congratulate you, Patagonia, for, I think it was Patagonia. Patagonia, if it wasn't you, sorry. It was a company like that that's very well known, very familiar. And he said, bravo to you for standing up against us, the evil oil companies from which all of your products are made and which you make all your profits. This is wokeism. We have to get people to believe a certain thing. It's like John Kerry denying that he ever owned a private jet. It's like Al Gore and his private jet fiasco after An Inconvenient Truth. It's all of this. There are hypocrites within the woke movement, just like there are in any other movement. But for the most part, wokeism is to gain political support. And it's to push for power positions in government. You don't believe me, keep watching. But don't stay silent too long. You might be end up being part of the metaphoric gulags that will arise out of not being woke. So leftism is deeply unpopular. The majority of Americans are not woke. And yet wokeness has an outsized influence at the top of academia, culture, business, across media. The result is the power of this narrative vastly, vastly outstrips its actual popularity and the general level of acceptance. Wokeism's permeation into every aspect of our lives as parents has the potential not just to reverse all of our hard work raising our children as upstanding young people, but to strip them of their innocence and resiliency as well. Conservatives have long been worried about the indoctrination of young adults on college campuses. David Horowitz, his Indoctrination U, The Left's War Against Academic Freedom, came out in 2009. Ben Shapiro wrote Brainwashed, How Universities Indoctrinate America's Youth in 2010. But what's happening today starts far earlier. A is for Activist is a board book. Board book. Big boards. They teach kids. A is for Activist. My first book of protest. And Woke, baby. These are books for little kids. But the ubiquity and the power of the woke worldview extends far past influences of childhood, from cradle to college, from the big moments to the small ones. Parents are subject to its influence on our kids. And worse yet, the woke want to turn our children into not just automatons, but active child soldiers in their fight to remake our society at its most basic level. And you do that by indoctrination because those kids don't know anything different. Because this is what they're taught from the beginning. So all of this indoctrination and conformity comes with the backing of plenty of money. After George Floyd's death, George Floyd. After his death and the ensuing Black Lives Matter protests that erupted in the summer of 2020 here in my own city, Minneapolis, companies and organizations reworked their organizational missions to include racial equity, not equality, equity, and social justice. Brands posted black squares on their social media and pledges to do better in hiring and showcasing diversity. Please continue to buy our stuff, was the unsaid. It was the new normal, and we were going to have to get on board or be left behind. Like the Patagonia or whatever company it was, just in case I'm misquoting that, using petroleum products in every single one of their products that they sold, but coming out against petroleum companies. It's that was just a plea to please continue to buy our stuff. We really are open-minded and woke. And so the pageantry was important. It applied the pressure on businesses to say all the right things and for organizations to pay up. Amazon donated a minimum of 550 copies of the book Stamped Racism, Anti-Racism, and You, as well as the accompanying study guide to Wakefield High School in Arlington, in Virginia. And in February of 2021, Amazon also funded $8,000 for the fee of one of the book's co-authors, Jason Reynolds, to give a talk virtually to faculty and students at various foundations. J.P. Morgan, Chase & Company, Ford Foundation, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and others. They spent more than $23 billion compared to a mere $3.3 billion for the 9 years previous, funding racial equity nonprofits in 2020 and 2021. Open Society Foundations, a group founded by George Soros, is one of the founders or the funders of the 1619 Freedom School, an after-school program based on the widely discredited 1619 series by Nicole Hannah-Jones. And by the way, lest you think I am not open to open-mindedness when learning about our history, I am. But I'm an historian. And I happen to know Nicole Hannah-Jones was wrong. And you couldn't push 1619 and be right-headed historically. Soros, we could do a whole show on that. And I guarantee you we will if it's called for. The Dead End Collective. Yes, he's like that. Yep. And Soros funds a variety of groups that reporter Luke Rosiak in 2019 called the Equity Industrial Complex. They fund local political races, pinpoint where equity education can be helpful, and also provide that equity education themselves. And while the very mention of Soros funding all of this sounds like a conspiracy theory, Rosiak points out that it's all out in the open. At least 3 of these groups, Center for Social Inclusion, Policy Link, and the Center for American Progress, are funded by Soros through his foundation to promote open society, according to tax records available through citizensaudit.org. And the obscene money spent on this indoctrination is important because it conveys to parents and the public at large that this is what we're doing now. And if you don't like it, guess what? You're racist, you're sexist, or worse. And the conformity that they demand is instrumental to the leftist cause. Conformity is easier to achieve than it may seem. Remember when we were talking about the Constitution last week or the week before? I can't remember when we started it. How do How does the federal government get power over the states which formed it? Because the states are willing conformists. That's how it happens. So conformity is easy. We all hope we'd stand up for what's right, but generally people want to be accepted by their peers, and they're going to cover up their real opinions to ensure that they are accepted. We hear all the silent majorities starting to come out over the last year because they're sick and tired of what's going on in our government. Why were there a silent majority? They were afraid of being canceled, doxxed, all of those things. And in the 1950s, a psychologist named Solomon Asch conducted the Asch conformity experiments, and each one had real participant and several actors who were all asked to match a line to another line of similar length. And the actors would knowingly give the same wrong answer. And about 5% of the participants always went with the group answer, and around a quarter of the participants always gave the correct answer, unswayed by the answers of the actors. But the rest would sometimes go along and other times would not. This is that cognitive science of Guangdong. It's called province. They found sustained conforming behaviors among children in situations of relatively low social pressure. In other words, kids won't just conform to the opinions of their peers in the present situation. They would continue to conform to those opinions even the following day, and even under minimal social pressure to do so. This is what kids do. To be liked, to be part of the group, they will conform. Preference falsification occurs because of societal pressure, even without overt threats. And we've got roughly about 30 seconds before we have to go out with the radio audience. So everybody listening by radio over on OdysseyRadio.com, we'll pick this up again either Friday or Monday, depending on what day we want to do it. And for now, we got to get out of here, but we're going to have the Captain's Cabin. So stay tuned over on my YouTube, and we'll see you there. And so, radio audience, without further ado, I just want to say to you, live long and prosper. Everybody else, sit tight.
Join us every weeknight at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time, 10 p.m. Eastern. The Intrepid Radio Program, a Scotty Roberts Productions broadcast.
Hey folks, this is Scotty Roberts, and this is the Intrepid Radio broadcast. I've been broadcasting for about 20 years now, covering such topics as science, politics, the paranormal, weird science, weird world history, archaeology, and the paranormal. Everything from ghosts to cryptids to creepy things that go bump in the night. So every week I bring you 3 new episodes. Come and join my channel and also be a patron to this site. So see the details below, and we'll see you here. Well, welcome to the captain's cabin, folks. Glad to have you aboard. And glad that you're here. Glad that you sat through that show and you're still here to join us for the cabin. If you want to call into the show tonight and talk about some of the things we talked about this evening, I'm going to post that link over here into the chat room, and you can join up with us. And is it hot there? I see Steve Clark was talking about frying eggs on the hood of his car. And we're hoping it cools off. It's been hot here, too. Man, has it been hot. And it's not just heat hot. It's humid heat hot. So it's like tropical rainforest almost. You walk outside and it's 90. The dew point is at 90%. And the humidity is just as high. And then it's 88 degrees outside, which feels like 97. Or up into the low 100s the other day. And so it's been hot, nasty hot out here. And you walk outside, it's like damn depressive to walk outside. So, but guess what? Winter's coming. And Niall's here too. Let's bring him in. How you doing, Niall?
Great to see you, Scotty.
Long time, brother.
I thought I'd jump in straight away.
I'm glad you did.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you a funny story, right?
Yeah, tell me.
And it ties into the sexual stuff we were talking about at the top of the show. And the confusion surrounding that. I remember when I was about 10 years old, and I had some older cousins in the family, and they were big into rock music at the time. So I got introduced to all these rock bands, and they used to play me vinyl from when I was 8 years old. And all these long-haired guys, you know, and I loved the music, you know, since I was very young. My parents hadn't a clue. they always associated, they grew up in the era of the kind of the show band era and all that kind of stuff, and the crooners and all. So they didn't understand this kind of rock band thing, which some of my older cousins were bringing over to the house and playing these vinyls and stuff like that. I was mad into it, and these guys looked so cool. And one particular day, my mother used to wear these long wigs. Then they were in fashion in the 70s, She always had kind of bad hair, so she used to compliment it with a wig, and she would tie it up in a bun on top of her head. So she had all these wigs, and I remember listening to this music and kind of posing in front of the mirror. And everyone I know knows this story, but and I used to pose in front of the mirror with the long wig. I used to steal my mother's wig from the wardrobe and put her over my head, and I'd be singing into something and waving this wig around, right?
Yep.
And I was like, a lot of these guys were wearing. We're talking about like 1978, so a lot of these guys were wearing platform boots. So I used to, and the only platform boots I could find were my mother's or not my sister. No. There was an older cousin who used to stay with us at the time. Anyway, I found these women's platform boots, and I was like posing in front of the mirror. And one day, my mother and father came in and caught me doing this. Right?
Nice.
Right? And it was a total and utter meltdown. They said, "Oh my God, Niall is completely and utterly
he's gone off the deep end. He's going to be a woman.
Oh, he's going to be a woman." It was like a huge panic attack. And I remember getting a lecture that day, and I remember it being brought up in future years, during my teens and stuff like that, being brought into when I was causing trouble in school. It was brought up that, wow, Niall has always been a little bit strange, remember that episode with the wig? You know what I mean?
It's been a little strange. Remember the wig?
Yeah, you remember the wig? And the funny thing is, it did kind of fuck up my life, excuse the language, because it introduced a little insect into my head that was like, well, maybe I am kind of different, maybe there is something to this. And so I think it stayed with me somehow subliminally throughout my life, in that my relationships with women and stuff were always kind of clouded with this little insect buzzing around my head going, remember the wig?
Do you remember the wig? Wear wigs.
Do you remember the boots? Do you remember the boots? Was that just trying to be a rock star? Or was that you just cross-dressing? Or was that you, were you really just, maybe you were trans back then?
Yeah.
And of course, these days, if you had a child who did that, you kind of clap and go, "Oh, that's great."
Or your sexuality.
That's great. In fact, wear the wig every day. We're glad that you found yourself. At the time, I hadn't a clue. I was just imitating.
And that's a major leap,
rock stars,
by the way, to go from, I was just trying this wig on because I thought it was kind of cool, not because I wanted to be a woman and found anything attractive with a man's hairy ass, but I wanted to try the wig on. And now they'll take that nowadays. You could wear that every day. And
exactly.
No, it's not about wearing it every day. It was about trying it on and see what it looked like.
Yeah. So, but that's why that whole sexual thing is kind of really important in those formative years, because what your parents will tell you kind of sticks with you, even though it's ridiculous. I mean, I was imitating a rock star. I knew that. I've always known that. But there was something in my head that goes like, well, maybe there was something there. You know what I mean? In other words, your parents are your teachers. At least they're supposed to be, and society is. So when it's always stayed with me, that particular story. Whereas these days it'd be like, oh, wear the wig every day. Wear the shoes. Yeah. If you're 5, 6, doesn't matter. Whatever.
And
wear your sister's dress.
When I was in, had to be upper grade school or middle school, I used my mom's makeup one day, and I made my face all up. Not like a woman, but like I drew in. I used her eyeliner to draw on a little Errol Flynn mustache. You know, I did the little mustache and little jazz thing here, and I darkened my eyebrows and did stuff like that. And she yelled at me for using her makeup. And she said, "Oh, do you want to be a girl really bad or something?" I'm like, "Mom, you know that's not why I did that.
Yeah.
I got a mustache on here." Which, by the way, I said to Rainey the other day, I said, "Wow, have you noticed how many young ladies have mustaches these days?" No, it was my 14-year-old son. And I saw one day, 2 days ago, I had them all out, and there was at least 3 different women that were definitely women, but they had facial hair. You know, just that fuzzy little facial hair. And I thought, wow, that's
most
interesting to
to
find 3 people like that in one day.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, you know, you can, just because you tried on your mom's wig, were you experimenting with your sexuality? No, it probably didn't go anywhere near that.
I mean, I was trying to be
cool. I want to try on this wig.
Well, this is a bad example, probably, but I was just trying to be Freddie Mercury. You know, I was just trying to. I was posing. I was really into this stuff. I still am to this day. Like, you know, I mean, if I was young enough, and thin enough, I would still be wearing wigs and throwing them around if I could. You know, it's just it was a natural.
I came on this show. I think it was in this studio. So it's within the last year. It was around Halloween time last year. And I had that long curly wig on, and I put a bandana on. And I think it was a blue wig, come to think of it. And it was at the behest of my daughters and their friends, who all came in all dressed up. And I just opened up the show that way. And I said, "Hey, man," I said, "we're doing grooving back to the 70s, man."
Scotty's had a sex change.
Yes. And so it was funny. But I came on as a guy with long hair, not, "Oh, I'm a woman now."
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing, I'm going to shut up now, but I'm saying this because I'm getting old and I forget things. LGBTQ, right? This is another funny kind of thing that nobody seems to know, even in the LGBTQ community, what queer means, or the Q, right? I have gay friends, and in my country, in Ireland, queer always meant gay. Always. If you're queer, you're gay, you know. And they're like, what is queer? Because we cover lesbian, gay, bisexual, and trans. So what does queer mean exactly? Is that a straight man who's effeminate? Is that a cross-dresser?
Right.
Is that, and my gay friends don't actually know what the Q means. It's like one of those things. Other, you know, it's like if you're filling out a form, you know, is it A, B, C, D, E, or other? You know, it's like Q is the other.
It's like, and I'm sorry, what's the word I'm looking for here? I was going to say something. Oh, disclaimer. Yeah. I'm not saying this. It's funny, I got to say this anymore. I'm not saying this against anybody. It's the way we used to talk. Like the word fag, which has different meanings in different countries and different languages, or same language, different countries. But when that's used as derogatory for somebody who's gay, yet I would hear when I was at festival and the whole gay community that was out there were a lot of gay guys that spoke. They go, "Oh, Brian, you ratty fag, you. Come on over here." You know, and they'd say things like that to each other. And it's like, "Hey, you're not supposed to say that, are you?" He goes, "We can say it because we are." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, I got it. And so I never said it derogatory unless it was when we were kids and we didn't know what it meant. Everybody was a fag. They go,
Yeah.
You know, Niall, you were out when we were playing baseball out in the field, but you lied and said you made it to the base in time. We go, hey, don't be such a fag. You know, you were out, fag.
Exactly.
Faggot, we call him.
Sometimes
We didn't know what that meant.
Yeah, sometimes I feel like, this community is just trying to use up the letters of the alphabet, you know? It's, I mean, I have yet, and if anybody would like to call in and explain what the Q means in LGBTQ, I would be delighted to hear them, because
And
gay
queer,
people don't even know what it means.
I get it, but
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Anyway,
I'll
I think it's very funny. I think it's very funny, but it is a massive movement, and it is a revolution.
Yes.
We can call it a revolution, a devolution, or an evolution, depending on where you are. But to my mind, it is a revolution. I mean, it is, but also it is. I do disagree with the whole trans thing, particularly in America. Guys, sorry about that, but it always happens in America. If you're 5 years old and you're like, "Hello, oh God, he must be gay."
Yes,
let's promote that. Let's
right.
And the first time you put on your sister's, skirt or something like that, oh wow.
Oh, he must be gay.
Yeah, he must be gay.
Tried on his sister's skirt.
He obviously wants a sex change. I mean,
see, that to me, that is not sexual experimentation. That is not experimenting with what it would be like to be there. It's just curiosity. It's looking at stuff and go, oh, how do they wear this stuff?
Kids
how would I look in a dress?
Kids
I had often said, I wish men could dress as flamboyantly as women, especially in business. What do? We got to wear suits and ties and suspenders and all that good-looking stuff, for guys. But we can't wear colorful robes. I want to wear a robe and a sash.
Yes.
And, I want to throw that sash up over my shoulder and, gaudy sandals.
Yeah.
It's nice to go to work like that, but it's not accepted. It's social
You can always
mores.
wear it on here. You dress
But
higher
I'd
than
wear a
on.
robe if I could get away with it. I'd wear a kilt all the time if I could get away with it.
I'm
I
looking
like
for
my
a kilt.
kilt.
Hey, I'm looking for a kilt. But no, it's crazy. But I'll ask my daughter what the Q stands for next time I talk to her.
Anita Palmer just said, I used to play with my brother's trucks, climb trees, and sometimes beat on my brother. It just made me a tomboy. Nothing more. Well, Anita, the school board would like you to know that it's okay for you to dress like a boy every day. And you can come every day. And we do have some teachers here that you could talk to and the counselor to share your desire to want to explore your sexuality. And all you're gonna say, no, I just like to wear jeans. I'm a tomboy.
Yeah.
So
Do you remember the days? Do you remember the days when the most heterosexual rock bands? Again, I'm using the idea of the rock bands or that analogy. Were dressed up in suspenders and high-heeled boots and wigs and makeup, and nobody ever said, "God, those guys are totally gay." No, they were rocking it. You know what I mean?
That's right.
I mean, it's so funny. How
and some of them were gay. You just didn't know it.
Yeah. But some of them were just dressing up and kind of going, "Well, this is what we wear," But I never thought during that period when I was growing up, oh my God, this is, some guys is shaking his junk at me, in suspenders. It was just part of the scene, everyone kind of dressed up. But these days it's like, if you dress like that for any reason, even if it's part of what you do professionally, that's, you obviously need a sex change. You book the surgical procedure straight away, So I've been going on about the sexual side of this topic for a while now, but it is actually huge because, as you said at the top of the show, 1% maybe,
Yep.
But everywhere you look now, it's like.
But it dictates everything.
It dictates everything. How many presenters? If you turn on the television, how many presenters are gay? 80% of them,
Probably.
and they talk about it. The lesbians keep quieter. If you're
But out of
trans,
330 million people in America, how many people do those presenters represent?
yeah, exactly.
Under 1%.
So I'll let somebody else talk. Good to see you, Michael. Thanks for listening to my waffle. It was good fun, though.
Oh, no,
And
it's good.
If you find out what queer means, Michael, please let me know, because
I can look it up and tell you what the official definition of queer is.
Like I said, I have a subject matter expert on that, and she's very vocal. And like I said, I support her, you know what I'm saying? And me and Scotty had talked about that before on a morning coffee. And everybody's like, how can you do that?
I always thought the LGBT covered everything, but the queer thing.
Yeah.
You got to remember, you got to put the plus in it. I'm trying to figure out what the plus means.
It says here that queer is an umbrella term for people who are not heterosexual or are not cisgender. So you can tell this is a definition, very new definition.
Well, what is
that's
cisgender?
That's somebody's pulled out of their ass, basically.
Yeah.
They made it up. Yeah, go ahead.
It originally meant strange or peculiar. Queer came to be used pejoratively against those with the same sex desires or relationships in the late 19th century. So that's the current definition you see online. The Oxford Languages definition means, number 1, queer means strange or odd. Number 2, denoting or relating to a sexual or gender identity that does not correspond to established ideas of sexuality and gender, especially heterosexual norms.
That says nothing. So, I mean, both of those terms are like total. They say nothing.
No, they don't.
About what it actually means.
Well, here, this will tell us, according to this, this is from them.us is the website. 9 LGBTQ plus people explain how they love, hate, and understand the word queer. And you can just go to us or them.us. That's the website. And so and they go through a big thing. Maybe this would be worth going through, but not right now. I don't feel like it.
I had a lady, I was filling out an application, and she said, Michael, I need to ask you some questions. I said, go ahead. So she got down there and she said, I really don't know how to ask this because I know your ideology and how you think. And I told her, I said, just go ahead and ask me. I said, if we got to figure it out, let's figure it out. She said, what do you identify as? And even before I thought, I said, I identify as a threat.
What?
As a threat.
Oh.
I identify as a good old boy who really, ain't going to bow to nobody.
Yeah, but she was talking about your sexual
identity.
Yeah,
that could work too.
I had an application I was filling out once. It was for, I want to say it was the state of Minnesota was looking for an art director or creative director for the Minnesota Historical Society. And it asked me in the application online what my pronouns were.
Yeah.
I said, seriously? I said, my pronouns, and I wrote down my pronouns, dude, Batman, and hey. And that's probably why I never got called back.
Probably.
Growing up, I identified as, goddamn it, go get wood.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And like I said, my dog identifies as the queen. So, everybody needs to identify as something. But like I said, it has got totally out of hand. But I was going to ask you, did you see on the news, you're talking about Russia today, that the guy who runs Wagner or whatever that mercenary group is?
Yeah, he was taken down today. Yep. In a crash, an airplane crash.
That had missile trails behind it.
Yeah. So Putin took him down. Yeah. Of course he did.
So, hey, Ryan Gale.
They still can't have free speech, but I might have to start traveling and asking all these people in different countries. But I play a lot of
an airplane crash with 2 missile streams behind it. That's
exactly.
But no, it's I play online poker a lot, or I did before I started back to school, and we play a lot with the English guys, the Irish guys, or whatever, because I have a very unique love, as you can tell by the flag. Oh, well, it's over there. But anyway,
Yeah.
For that. So, so I'm in there and the guy's like, hey, sound like you lit a fag. And they voice banned him for 30 days because he's talking about having a smoke, right? He said, oh, did you just light a fag? And next thing you know, he went, his whole mic got cut off. And the algorithm had banned him for using a derogatory term. And so I went to a private chat with him. I'm like, hey, dude, what happened? He said, I just got a notification. I need to appeal this. I said, that is bad when they have AI listening for keywords that they don't like.
Yeah, what light up a fag is, you can imagine what that means in these days.
Yeah,
I just lit up a fag. It's like I'm
I
downtown.
And I talked about this recently. A friend of mine from Ghost Hunters, the television show, he was on a little radio show, just a little thing. This had to be back in 2009, 10, 11, something like that. And they were talking. I was part of that show. Just some friends of mine that ran a podcast, and 25, 50 listeners maybe. And we were talking, and he made some comment about, we were talking about guns and gun ownership in California. And he said, yeah. He says, California, though. He goes, yeah. He says, all those fags out there, they're not going to own any guns anyway. And he wasn't talking about gay people. He was talking about using that as the derogatory we used to when we were kids. Hey, you fag, type of thing. And he got booted from the show.
Yeah.
For that. He wasn't one of the main two, but he was very important to the show. And he got booted because the production company didn't want to, back in 2010, 11, they didn't want to have to put up with, what do we do now? And this was kind of the beginnings of a lot of this stuff. And so they gave him the boot. And it took him a long time. I think they brought him back few years later after he'd done his penance, and had to make his apologies and things like that. And so that was brutal.
Hey, I remember the first time I ever was hanging out with like British soldiers or whatever, and there was a few Australians there, and they walked over. They said, "Hey, any of y'all got any bags among you?" I said, "I don't know." I said, "We don't ask, don't tell." And he said, "No, cigarette." Now, like, so then,
I figured, yeah.
But that's asking for a smoke.
Yeah,
and I was like, yeah, but then it kind of figured it out. In the other day, right before I started on the patch and trying to vape to stop this, when his mom was in the background, she said, "Michael's got a fag in his mouth," and I had to remember what continent they're on. Right. I thought, no, damn it, I don't. I'd never do that. I'm straight as a bow and arrow. You know what I'm saying? It's like, bam.
I get it.
It is like, no, don't. But
Mike, may I ask you? I'm Irish. Are you from down south somewhere? I'm trying to pick
just a little bit.
You're a bit of Dixie there, or yeah, cool.
Yeah, I've been all over the world and get ready to start traveling again. I got my papers in the mail that said I could travel international today. So,
Goddess Justice says, I have a thought here. If the definition of woke is accepted to have changed for the worse, why be surprised if other words for cigarettes have also changed the definition for the worse? I can accept that. I can accept things like symbols, like we talked about this the other day, like the swastika. That was not originated as a sign for the Third Reich thousands of years ago.
It was actually a Buddhist symbol. It was actually a Buddhist symbol originally.
Right. Yeah. But who usurped that and who has changed its meaning, at least for now, it seems forever? The Nazi Party did, the Third Reich. And so that's an example of that the other way around. They've taken something that once had a very peaceful, good, uplifting meaning, and they changed it to mean something very negative. That is now a stigma, even 80 years after the end of that war, almost a century after the end of that war, it is still a stigma.
Yeah, almost precisely the exact opposite of its origin, of its
now
inception.
A symbol of hate.
And you still cannot.
I said, why couldn't we take that symbol back and just say, I'm doing T-shirts now. We're going to put the swastika on it, and we're going to call it peace and love and happiness, fulfillment, all of these things that go along with the swastika. Why couldn't we take that and reclaim it? Because still, the first impression that is so indelibly planted on everybody's mind is that swastika stands for.
It's ingrained. Yeah.
Now, maybe a generation from now, that'll change. But
I think speaking with about the swastika, the Socialist Party, they did straighten up the hooked cross in the 30s. Before Hitler came to power, there were a number of esoteric groups who used the hooked cross. In German, I think it's called the Herzkreuz or something like that. But actually, the arms of the swastika were curved.
Oh,
so it formed a circle. Right. Yeah, and that was the original kind of Buddhist symbol, and it came. So it was floating around in Austrian and Germanic kind of theosophy and esoteric. But again, so the Nazi Party took that and kind of bastardized it and said, we need to straighten up the arms. And some of the stuff we agree with, some of it we don't, what these teachings were of these various societies that were springing up around Germany at the time, some of which were blatantly racist and trying to be spiritual at the same time. But that they had taken the original swastika from Buddhist teaching centuries before. So how it ended up as the Nazi symbol was just purely because they just liked the look of it.
And there's a couple of places I've seen it on buildings that predate the Nazi Party. I remember out in Estes Park, Colorado. Most people that are into ghost hunting have heard of the Stanley Hotel, where The Shining and all of that, and Stephen King and the Stanley. And the hauntedness of that.
That was the Overlook Hotel.
Yes.
Yeah. Go ahead.
They used a different hotel
Colorado,
for the exterior in the Jack Nicholson movie, but that's where Stephen King wrote the novel, started writing the novel. And you go into one of the big old rooms.
I didn't know that.
Off the lobby, there's a big room with a huge fireplace, and all this hand carved wood around the fireplace. But what's on the fireplace? There's little symbols that are carved into it. There's swastikas on the old fireplace, and they've taken little blocks of wood about 1/4 of an inch thick and little blocks like this, and they've covered them up, drilled a hole in and covered them up. You can see that it's underneath there. So what they were doing by doing that was saying, look, we're not going to obliterate it and remove it, but we're going to cover it, but kind of let you know what's still there. This is what was there when this was originally built in the 1800s. And then you've got in Minneapolis, we have the big Institute of Arts in Minneapolis. It's a huge museum. And this thing is one of those big, colossal, like the Greek Parthenon type of buildings, only bigger. And way up on the top, on the decorative motifs around the top edge, you've got swastikas. And so because that was built before World War II, and it meant something totally different. So,
but Hitler was big into the occult, but they are remembered for that one symbol. And Anita just said the Iron Cross was another that later became a bad German symbol. The Iron Cross.
Yeah. And it became a symbol of neo-Nazism. Yeah,
right.
The Iron Cross. Again, it's not quite a crucifix. What is it? It's like the pentagram. The pentagram, right? Originally was represented the 5 wounds of Christ. The arms, the feet, and the wound in the side, and then you invert it. And it's upside down, and it's inverted. But that actual star shape of the pentagram is actually a Christian symbol.
Yeah.
And I've got a lot of pentagrams in my place because I like the shape. I don't have swastikas, because you just can't do swastikas because
Right.
it'll be misunderstood. So does pentagrams, but an upright pentagram is fine, but it is a Christian symbol of the 5 wounds of Christ. But it has been initiated into every kind of black, kind of satanic kind of. It's the worst satanic symbol you can have. It's almost as bad as the swastika, the pentagram. But it's not,
Yeah.
And there's other symbols like that, that there's just no-go areas,
Well, the pentagram is now the sign of the werewolf.
Yeah.
For even a man who is pure at heart and says his prayers by night may become a wolf when the wolfbane blooms and the moon is full and bright.
Yeah, witchcraft, anything evil, that sign, that star, especially just a star, it's a 5-pointed star, has been, and it's impossible to shake that off, because people who don't know any better will always say, "Oh, my God,
winners write the history books."
You obviously carve people up in your basement,
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that's symbolism for you.
Here, I got a delay right now.
Definitely. Well, guys, I am going to be calling this a night. It is 10:36, and I said at the beginning of the captain's cabin, I'm going to have to wrap this kind of early tonight. But Niall, it's good to have you back in here tonight.
Okay,
don't be a stranger. Let's do it again.
I'll catch you next time.
All right, brother. And Niall, sorry, Michael. Good to have you here as well.
Yeah.
So
I was going to tell you that one reason I come on. I was going to tell you. You told me to get off my ass and make it happen.
Got your passport, right on.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Right on.
That's it. So, like I said, I can travel. And I was going to ask Niles before we got out of here. Have you ever been to America? Have you ever came over to visit, or?
Yeah, not for extended period, just on holidays. You
only take us in a little short.
I mean, I mean, I would love to go and just travel around, and just talk to people. I mean, I'm one of those people who would love to do Route 66 or something like that in a car.
Yeah.
Even though it might be dangerous at various places, but I'm a sucker for like Quentin Tarantino movies. I just want to pull into a dusty old bar in the middle of the desert in Arizona somewhere, and get down with the locals and play pool. So I love everything about. I love the Americanisms that I've built up in my head as to be very
Americana.
special. Yeah.
That Americana. By the way, Palmer, thanks for being here tonight.
Americana. That's the word. Yeah. So no, to answer your question, Michael, I haven't spent a huge amount of time in America. Just vacation stuff. Yeah.
Speaking of passports, my twin daughters, about 10 days ago, wrote me and said, "Dad, is your passport up to date?" And I said, "Yeah, it is. Why?" And they said, "Your birthday's coming up in November. We're going to take you to Scotland in November." So my oldest daughters are planning to take me to Scotland. And I said, they said, "Is it all right with Rainey?" I said, "I'm pretty sure Rainey will be okay with it." She travels to Alaska to visit her relatives and stuff like that. And we have some of our things we do. And I said, I'd love to bring her along, but I'm pretty sure she'll be okay with it. And so it looks like we're probably going the first week in November for about 10 days. Yeah. And my 2 daughters and I. So
it's talking about being dangerous on Route 66. The worst part would be is going through Chicago, because they're basically saying from 9 at night to 9 in the morning, if you need to kill somebody, do it during 10-12 hours and let decent people have the street between 9 and 9 in the morning. But I live on part of 56. It's very gorgeous. But when I fly over, I want to see Belfast. For some reason, I am drawn to Belfast. And, that's in Niles, your country. but yeah, my heart's calling me to London.
Your neck of the woods.
So
Yeah.
Your neck of the woods. Yeah.
Give me a shout, Scotty, if you feel like taking the hop over to the other islands.
All right.
When you're over there.
Well, we'll see what happens. My daughters asked what we wanted to do when we're out there, and I said, I got a few things.
And by the way, Scotland in November, cold.
That's what I have heard.
Becky long candles.
They were saying maybe we need to put it off till May. And I said, well, I don't know. Let's find out. Let's think about it. So
the Scotland is pretty northern, so you're going to be cold. Yeah.
That's what I've heard. It's gonna be a little cold.
More than cold. It's not like the dry cold that you guys get. This is like damp cold.
Damp cold.
Like, oh my god. Yeah.
Damn
the last
cold.
time I was in Scotland,
lots of rain, lots of gray skies.
September. I was in Scotland in September the last time I was there, and it was gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous weather. Yeah. So, but November's 2 months later. So
after that, it's just like it's pretty hellish. It's
that's good to know.
From October, November, December, January, and February, it's like gray skies, cold,
right?
Damp. So.
Yeah,
you might get the sun might pop up occasionally, but I wouldn't count on it.
What about
don't count on
it. All right, I'll let you go.
All right, guys, you have a good night.
Thanks, Scotty. Take care.
Thanks for coming in.
Hey.
And Michael, good to see you, brother. I'm going to sign this show off, and I'll talk to you soon. Oh, and I see Captain Barbados is out there. We're wrapping up the show here, Matthew, so we'll catch you next time. And everybody else, thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of the show. And I just want to ask you, come on over to Patreon, sign up over there, become a member. I'd appreciate that. And all of you that are here, you have a good night. And I will see you next time. We'll see you on Friday. And in the meantime, live long and prosper.